John was from a humble Christian family, but after the death of his father, life took a drastic turn for the worse. His mother, Madam Gloria, squandered all the money given to her by the white man whom her late husband had worked for. With the breadwinner gone, Madam Gloria and her children fell into severe poverty. Despite John's best efforts to provide for the family, Madam Gloria was unappreciative and constantly compared him to Samuel, the wealthy son of a neighbor. Although the source of Samuel's wealth was highly questionable, Madam Gloria didn't care. She wanted some of that fortune for herself. Driven by frustration and the endless financial demands from his mother, John eventually decided to follow Samuel to the city to uncover the secret of his sudden success. However, there was far more to Samuel's story than met the eye. After 3 years of struggling with poverty, John gave in to the pressure and accompanied Samuel to meet a native doctor who performed a money ritual for him. The ritual made John wealthy almost overnight, but it came at an unimaginable cost. Although John was now a rich young man, his happiness was short-lived. Burdened by guilt and inner turmoil, he decided to visit his mother in the village. Madam Gloria was overjoyed to see her son, who had suddenly become successful. She called on relatives and friends to celebrate John's return, oblivious to the sinister truth behind his newfound wealth. To honor him, Madam Gloria ordered a goat to be slaughtered and a feast prepared for the small crowd of admirers who had gathered. The celebration felt like a festival. Even the village's local music group rushed to the scene, playing instruments and singing John's praises. "John, you are a true son of the soil," they chanted. "You are like the great Iroko tree that provides shade for others. May your days be filled with happiness, and may your wealth never run dry." These words brought smiles to John's face, and he threw money into the air to please the crowd. But beneath his calm exterior, John was deeply disturbed. He knew the clock was ticking, and he couldn't afford to stay outside when night fell. The consequences would be catastrophic, not just for him but for others as well. In a quiet moment, John signaled to Madam Gloria to meet him inside the house for a private conversation. Sensing the urgency in his eyes, she reluctantly excused herself from the guest and followed him indoors. Once inside, John broke down completely, weeping like a child. Alarmed, Madam Gloria tried to console him, her voice trembling as she asked, "My son, what is the matter?" For a moment, John could only sob, struggling to gather himself. Finally, with tears streaming down his face, he confessed, "Mama, your son is in deep trouble. I've done something terrible. The money ritual the native doctor performed for me has turned me into a monster. Every night, I transform into a deadly beast that must be locked away. And worse, the ritual demands the innocent souls of young women every week. I'm so frustrated and lost, Mama. Please, tell me what to do. Should I confess to the village elders?" John's bitter tears flowed freely as he awaited his mother's response. To his shock, Madam Gloria simply smiled. Her calm demeanor baffled him, given the gravity of his confession. Before he could make sense of her reaction, she said, "My son, I can't believe you're this worked up over such a trivial issue." Her expression then turned serious as she continued, "Listen to me, and listen well. You must not tell anyone about this, not even the village elders. The secret behind your wealth, even the task the native doctor gave you, is quite simple," Madam Gloria said reassuringly, patting John on the shoulder. "Just transforming into an animal at night while enjoying your riches during the day, what's the big deal? As for women, don't worry. As long as the money keeps flowing, they'll flock to you in droves." John was taken aback by Madam Gloria's response. To her, everything seemed perfectly fine, but deep down, John knew he was treading a dangerous path. He sincerely wanted to make amends but was overwhelmed by confusion, unsure of his next step. As these troubling thoughts occupied his mind, a knock came at the door. When John opened it, he found Lydia, a friend of Madam Gloria, standing there with a cheerful smile. "Come out. Everyone's looking for you. Let's celebrate," Lydia said, completely unaware of the chaos brewing beneath the surface. John reluctantly joined the crowd outside, and the celebration continued. However, his mind was far from the festivity, as a storm of guilt and regret brewed within. Madam Gloria, on the other hand, couldn't ignore her concerns. She knew John was in grave danger because of his involvement in the ritual. She also knew that the village elders held the answers, and possibly a solution, but she dared not go to them. If the ritual was reversed, the money would stop flowing, and she wasn't ready to risk that. Determined to guard the source of John's wealth, she resolved to keep it a secret. As the celebration wound down, the guests began to disperse. Madam Gloria, however, was deeply troubled. She realized John needed to leave the village as soon as possible to avoid raising suspicion. Yet, traveling at night was out of the question. It was far too dangerous for him. The following morning would be their only option. That evening, she went to the local market and purchased chains to restrain John in his room for the night. At sunset, Madam Gloria secured John in his room, chaining him tightly and locking the door from the outside. As the night fell, silence enveloped the house. For hours, there was no sound from John's room. Relieved, Madam Gloria smiled to herself, thinking her precautions had worked. She retired to bed, finally at ease. But her relief was short-lived. At exactly 2 a.m., she was jolted awake by a deep, guttural growl, an unearthly sound like nothing she had ever heard before. Trembling, she realized it was coming from John's room. Fear paralyzed her as the growls grew louder and more aggressive. The rattling of the chains signaled John's desperate attempts to break free. Madam Gloria's worst fear had come true. The chains were no match for John in his transformed state. She prayed fervently, tears streaming down her face, hoping for divine intervention. The commotion soon drew the attention of neighbors, who woke up in terror but stayed hidden in their homes, too afraid to confront the strange and terrifying sounds. Inside the house, things took a darker turn. The chains only seemed to enrage the creature John had become. Madam Gloria and her children huddled together, crying and trembling. Although the children didn't fully understand the situation, they sensed the danger. Just when all hope seemed lost, the noise abruptly stopped. A tense silence followed, and Madam Gloria could hardly believe it. Morning finally arrived, and with a heavy heart, she cautiously unlocked John's room. Inside, she found him lying on the floor, utterly drained and panting heavily. Although relieved that he had survived, John was overcome with sorrow. Madam Gloria tried to console him, but their attention was soon drawn to noises outside the house. Looking through the window, they saw a group of concerned neighbors gathered and whispering among themselves. Madam Gloria quickly stepped outside to join them, hoping to deflect suspicion. "There was a wild animal roaming the village last night," one neighbor said. It was so aggressive. What could it be? I don't know, another replied, but it's strange. If such a beast was out there, how come none of the livestock was harmed? This observation left the group puzzled, deep in thought. Madam Gloria forced herself to smile, relieved they hadn't uncovered the truth. But her relief was short-lived. What if we consult the village elders? Someone suggested. They might know what's going on. Madam Gloria's heart sank. If the elders were involved, the truth would come to light. She knew she had to act quickly to protect John and her secret. Madam Gloria realized that she needed to act quickly. She called the other neighbors together and said, "Indeed, a white creature appeared here last night. I saw it with my own eyes. As the noise continued to disturb, I peered through my window and saw it disappear into the darkness. I propose that we gather a group of brave hunters from the village to protect us at night and kill the creature if it returns." The neighbors murmured in agreement, nodding at the idea. Madam Gloria continued, "To support this cause, I will donate 500,000 naira from my purse to sponsor the hunters." Her generosity left the neighbors overjoyed, and they thanked her profusely before returning to their homes. Meanwhile, back at the house, John told Samuel to pack his belongings immediately. It wasn't safe to stay another night in the village, as the hunters might mistake him for the white creature. While Samuel packed, Madam Gloria took her other children to her sister Jane's house. She explained her plans to return to the city with John and promised to send money regularly for her children's upkeep. Jane agreed, and they bid each other farewell. That very morning, Madam Gloria and John left the village for the city. Upon arriving at John's residence, Madam Gloria was stunned by his immense wealth and influence. Although she had known he was rich, she hadn't realized the full extent of it. His garage housed some of the most luxurious cars from renowned brands, and his home in the upscale area of Ikoyi, Lagos, was nothing short of a palace. Madam Gloria soon adapted to the lavish lifestyle. She frequented nightclubs, ordering the most expensive wines and throwing money into the air. Her extravagant behavior earned her the nickname Thick Lady, not only for her size but for her ostentatious display of wealth. Men flocked to her, each vying for her attention, and she entertained them with abandon, fulfilling her fantasies in the privacy of her home. To ensure the money kept flowing, Madam Gloria secretly began bringing 2 or 3 women to John each week, despite the original instructions that required only one woman for the ritual. She reasoned that if one woman could generate such wealth, more women would bring even greater riches. Her greed drove her actions, and true enough, the more women John sacrificed, the more money appeared in his room the next day. The women's screams echoed through the nights, but Madam Gloria was unmoved. Each scream only signaled more wealth to her, leaving her delighted by the results. On the other hand, John was deeply troubled. The wealth brought him no happiness, as he was haunted by the cries of the women he had sacrificed. Their voices followed him everywhere, tormenting him day and night. Sometimes he would shout at the unseen voices in public, startling those around him. His strange behavior began to raise concerns among observers, who wondered if he had lost his sanity. John often complained to his mother, pleading for a way out of the ritual. But Madam Gloria would dismiss his concerns, sometimes responding angrily and other times breaking down in tears. "How can you even think of quitting?" she would sob. "If the money stops, how will I take care of your siblings? I've sent so much money home for their upkeep and I'm even planning to send them to the best schools abroad." If the money stops, all our dreams will crumble. Her emotional manipulation always struck a chord with John, who had a soft spot for his family. What he didn't realize, however, was that Madam Gloria's tears were insincere. She hadn't sent any money home, nor was she concerned about her other children. Her sole focus was to amass as much wealth as possible before the inevitable end of the ritual. As time passed, John's depression worsened. The voices grew louder and more unbearable. To cope, he turned to alcohol, drugs, and excessive smoking, especially on the nights he was forced to carry out the sacrifices. The substances took a toll on him, but Madam Gloria didn't care. Her only interest was in keeping the money flowing. One day, something unexpected happened. John's mentor, the one who had introduced him to the money ritual, fell gravely ill. His condition baffled doctors, as all medical tests came back inconclusive. His mother, Lydia, and other relatives rushed to his side, distraught over his mysterious illness. Lydia wailed loudly, blaming envious villagers for her son's suffering. Meanwhile, the atmosphere around John grew heavier, signaling that the consequences of their actions were finally catching up to them. On his sickbed, Samuel requested to see John for a private conversation. When John was brought before him, Samuel, in a frail voice, began, "John, there's something I must tell you. You need urgent help. The money ritual the old man performed for me is the reason for this ailment. The task I was given at the shrine was that I must not sleep at night, and I must not sleep with the same woman twice. That's why I've been spending every night at nightclubs, just to stay awake and avoid dozing off. But yesterday, I couldn't take it anymore. I fell asleep right at the club. In my dream, an old man slapped me. When I woke up, I found myself in this condition. I reached out to the barber, and he told me there was nothing he could do. This is the end of the road for me. No drugs can save me now. But as for you, there's still time. You must find a way out immediately before it's too late." Samuel spoke in such a weak voice that John could barely hear his final words. A cold shiver ran down John's spine as the reality of the situation began to sink in. While he stood there, the doctors arrived to prepare Samuel to be discharged from the hospital. Samuel's relatives were taking him back to the village, believing his illness was spiritual and required traditional intervention. This is not an ordinary sickness, it's a spiritual case. Our village elders will know what to do, Samuel's uncle, the eldest relative present, declared. They rushed Samuel out of the hospital, but before they could even reach the ambulance, he passed away. The shock of his sudden death sent waves of grief through the hospital. Lydia, Samuel's mother, collapsed to the floor, wailing uncontrollably, unable to be consoled. It was as if her world had come crashing down with the loss of her son. Meanwhile, John sat silently in a corner of the hospital, tears streaming down his face as a storm of thoughts swirled in his mind. Samuel, who had been like an older brother to him, was gone, his life cut short by his poor choices. John began reflecting on his own life, realizing he wasn't much different from Samuel and that his fate would be the same if he didn't change his path. The journey from the hospital back home was heavy and silent. Madam Gloria, John's mother, noticed her son's troubled state and suspected that Samuel might have said something to him before passing. When they got home, she wasted no time asking him what Samuel had told him at the hospital. John, in his honesty, told her everything, how Samoa had warned him to find a solution to avoid the same tragic end. In her usual manipulative manner, Madam Gloria immediately dismissed John's concerns. "Is this what's upsetting you, my son? Listen to me, I'm your mother. I would never let anything bad happen to you. Trust me. As long as I keep bringing those women to you, you'll be fine. Nothing will harm you," she said, gently patting his shoulder. John remained silent, torn and confused about what to do. Madam Gloria smiled softly, satisfied that her words were having the desired effect. Little did she know, her actions were digging her own grave. And so, today's episode comes to a close. What do you think will happen next? Will Madam Gloria get a taste of her own bitter medicine? What will become of John's fate? Find out in the next episode. Thank you for watching today's story. Don't forget to support this channel by subscribing, leaving a like, and turning on the notification bell so you don't miss the next episode. Also, share your thoughts in the comment section and let me know where you're watching from so I can send you a hug in the next episode. While you wait for the next story, feel free to watch other videos displayed on your screen. Bye.